What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and we got our final Week 5 recap here with the PAC-12. We've gone through every other conference. So later on today, we'll have our playoff eliminators, so make sure you come back and check that out. But let's get to the games. First off, the game from Friday night, USC at Washington State. This was one of the best games of the weekend. And how about Washington State getting this one, getting the upset at home? USC continues to struggle. Sam Darnold is not playing like he was last year. I still kind of thought as the game was going, I thought USC would find a way to win it in the end. But hey, hats off to Washington State. They played really well in this game. Let's look at the stats from this one. Total yards to Washington State 462, USC 327. So almost 150 more yards for Washington State. That's a surprise. They threw for 340 yards against, what we thought was a decent USC defense. Sam Darnold only able to pass for 164. He was 15 of 29 in this game. And USC really struggled on third downs, 2 of 11. They had a couple of turnovers and also 9 penalties for 80 yards. So they just didn't play very well. Washington State, they did. They played very solid in this game, and they took care of business. They got the upset at home. Washington State, I think that they're better than maybe we thought, but I don't think they're a serious contender. And I'm sorry to the Washington State fans. I think this was more about USC is just not anywhere near as good as we thought they were. Now, Washington State's probably one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the Pac-12. Don't get me wrong. But at this point, it kind of looks like Washington's the only real serious contender to maybe get to the playoffs in the Pac-12. We'll have to see going forward. Can't count Washington State out just yet. Now, obviously, they're undefeated, but we'll see how they play moving forward. They got a tough schedule. I think they only have 2 more home games the rest of the season, so we'll see how they handle those road games. All right, next game is Arizona State at Stanford. Stanford's starting to play better. They had that blowout loss to USC, who is now not looking all that good, and then they lost to San Diego State. San Diego State looks to be a pretty good team, but still, you were kind of thinking, wow, maybe Stanford is not going to be that good this year. But now they're starting to put it together. They had a nice win over UCLA. They get this one against Arizona State. Had 501 yards in this game, 328 on the ground. Bryce Love was phenomenal in this game. And Arizona State, I've been saying, I still think this is a pretty good team. So this was a nice win for Stanford. And, they still control their own destiny in the Pac-12 North because their one loss came to USC, who's in the South. If they beat Washington State, if they beat Washington and win the rest of their games, Stanford could go to the Pac-12 championship. So a lot of their goals still in front of them. They still got a chance to maybe make a lot of noise there in the Pac-12. They're not really a playoff team anymore. I think they're eliminated from that. But yeah, Stanford still has a lot to play for. Arizona State struggling a little bit right now. They now have 3 losses on the season, so we'll see if they're able to bounce back from this one. But again, Stanford just getting that ground game going, and that really proved to be the difference. Bryce Love, he is skyrocketing up that Heisman list. We'll see where he lands this week. I'll have my Heisman video coming up a little bit later this week. All right, so that's our second game. Next game we're going to go to is Washington at Oregon State. And, you pretty much got what you expected here. Washington, one of the better teams, if not the best team in the Pac-12. Oregon State is clearly the worst team in the Pac-12. The total yards in this game, Washington 509, Oregon State 184. It was complete domination. There's just really not a whole lot to say about this game other than the fact that Washington's really good, Oregon State's really bad, and you got exactly what you would have expected here with a 42-7 win for the Washington Huskies. All right, next we got Cal at Oregon. A very nice win here for the Oregon Ducks, 45-24. They get the job done here. And, I was really impressed with the Oregon defense. They hold Cal to just 263 yards. We, think Oregon, having that bad defense and all that, but they did a pretty good job in this game. They outgained them 459-263. Turnovers in this game, a couple for Cal, 1 for Oregon. The run game for Oregon, 328 yards on the ground. When you can run it like that, you're pretty much going to win every single football game. They didn't have to throw it much, 131 yards through the air. This is a big win for Oregon, despite 10 penalties for 110 yards, so they're going to have to clean that up. And this Oregon team is in the same boat as Stanford. They have one loss, but it's to a South team, so they still control their destiny. So you're looking at the Pac-12 North. Oregon, I still think Oregon's a good team. Stanford looking pretty good. Washington State looking really good. Washington looking like probably the favorite. You have 4 teams there in the North that could all potentially win it. I mean, they really could. So we'll see how it going forward, who emerges out of that list. It's, you would think it's going to be Washington, but I still think Oregon has a chance. Oregon and Stanford both. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that Pac-12 North plays out with all these teams that maybe have a loss, but they don't have a loss in the division. So they still, have a lot to play for, plenty of chances to win that division. And we'll see what happens as the Pac-12 moves forward. One of the more interesting races, I think, in all of college football. All right, let's go now. Last game, Colorado at UCLA. Another good one. This was a very even game. UCLA wins it by 4 points. Total yards in this one, 467 to 434 in favor of UCLA. Once again, Josh Rosen, very good. 372 passing yards for this team. Only 95 on the ground. They continue to not, really be able to get that run game going. But they did enough. Josh Rosen played well in this one. They got it done. They were 9 of 16 on third downs. That's pretty good. They overcame the one turnover, none for Colorado. So this was a big win for UCLA. We talk about these teams not being out of it. UCLA, they're not out of it either, because they have the one loss to Stanford. Stanford's in the North. So, they haven't lost a game in the South. So a lot of teams have lost games in the Pac-12, but they haven't lost games in their division. So it's still a wide open race. I'm really kind of leaning towards what I was saying the other day, that these teams in the Pac-12 may just all beat up on each other, and we may not get a Pac-12 team in the playoffs this year. Washington really seems like the only team that I think could really have a pretty good chance of running the table and getting to the playoffs just like last year. But their schedule is going to get a little bit tougher as we go on through the season. So we'll see how all that plays out. But it's getting very interesting here in the Pac-12. Like I said, this is one of the more interesting conferences to watch. You've got in the Big 12, you really feel like it's Oklahoma's. Maybe TCU, West Virginia, Oklahoma State. They're still alive there, but you feel like Oklahoma is that team. In the ACC, it's clear. It's Clemson. Clemson is the top team in the ACC. Nobody else, I think is even really close to them. We'll see, how Miami does going forward. They don't play during the regular season. Okay, so not a lot to be decided there. You go to the Big Ten in the West, it's definitely Wisconsin. Nobody else is going to really challenge them. Now, the East is still up for grabs. And that's an interesting division with Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, and maybe Michigan State. I don't really think they're going to be a contender, but we'll see. So that's an interesting race as well. And then in the SEC, right now it looks like it's Alabama and Georgia. It doesn't, it looks like there's some pretty good separation between them and their other teams in their division. So you look at across college football at all these conferences, all these divisions, and the Pac-12 really is looking like that the conference that has both divisions really, where you don't know who's going to win it. So a lot of excitement out here in the Pac-12. I know they don't get as much attention, but this could be the season to really pay attention to the Pac-12 and see how the race goes. It should be a lot of fun to watch. But that's going to do it for this episode, this video. Again, later today we'll have our playoff eliminator, and we will also start our power rankings, probably do the SEC, and then we'll do the rest of the power rankings tomorrow. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports YouTube channel.